All right, everyone, welcome to the ARRL Forum. We have Tom Frenaye, who is our New England Division Director. Are you the longest serving director unconsecutively? That a true statement?
Yeah, I had two breaks.
Yeah, so I mean, how many years? 16, 20 years, something like that?
I was first elected in 1985.
Wow. And this Hamfest in one form or another has been running since 1981. So we bring out all the old guys today. Okay, so everyone, Tom Frenaye, K1KI.
All right, thanks, Mitch. Good to be back in Vermont. I haven't been north of Massachusetts in a while. And I'm glad to see you guys have lots of snow. As we don't. We got maybe a foot total this year. I guess I had more in New Orleans a few weeks ago. Anyhow, I live in northern Connecticut, about 10 miles from Springfield, Mass, right along the Connecticut-Mass line. And I'm Arrl New England Division Director. And for those of you that don't know how the Arrl works, Arrl has a board of directors that sets policy for the organization. There are 15 members of the board, 15 directors, and it's a geographically based set of directors. There's one from New England. There's one from that covers much of New York. There's one that covers Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and across the country. There's 15 separate geographical areas that elect directors for 3-year terms. As Mitch was saying as he introduced me, I actually first got elected in 1985. I served as director for a number of years. I actually was a third vice president for a couple of years. And then they decided they didn't need a third vice president. So I ran for director again and got elected. And served for a number of years until 2018, and somebody challenged me, and I lost by 100 votes. So I've been off the board for 6 years, and this last summer, I looked at what was going on and decided I was not happy with the direction the league was going, and I basically said I have enough experience and knowledge that I think I can make a difference. So I ran again, and I won by 150 votes in November. So I'm back and older, for what it's worth. But so are you. Funny problem we all seem to have. But anyhow, so it's been an interesting. I took office on January 1st. We actually had a board meeting third week of January. I had a interesting experience getting acquainted with the rest of the board because almost all of them changed in the time that I was not on the board. And had an interesting meeting. We got some good things done, and we had some good discussions about things. But one of the first things I want to do before I get into the details of some of the league activities is talk to you about two presentations I want to make today. One is for a gentleman who lives in Vermont named Paul Wade, W1 Golf Hotel Zulu. Paul is somebody that I think I met a bunch of years ago, but I don't recognize him now. It's been a long time. Paul is a writer of the QST microwave column. And occasionally he writes also for QEX, which is our technical magazine. And last year he wrote a really interesting article about tracking down interference, particularly on the microwave bands, and the techniques he used to deal with some noise level problems he had from his QTH, primarily from commercial microwave stations, TV stations, and how he solved it. And it's a pretty interesting article. And I have you somewhere a note about it. The article is called "Great Noise Figure, but Still Can't Hear." So he had some serious problems with some things in the neighborhood, and the steps he went through in trying to be able to hear better were very interesting. QST has an award called ARL has an award called the Doug DeMaw W1FB, Fox Bravo Technical Excellence Award. It's not an award that you apply for. It's not an award that anybody can make a nomination for. So how the hell do you get it? It turns out that the QST technical staff, ARL technical staff, and the group of people that the league uses as technical advisors on articles makes the decision. The ARL staff picks half a dozen or more articles during the year that they think are really excellent articles, and then they have the technical advisors vote on which article should get the award for the year. And over the years, there's been some really incredibly good articles that have been nominated for this award, and the awards have been made appropriately. But this year, they picked Paul and his article from QEX from last year, July-August issue, as the best one. So I get the honor of presenting it. The board in January voted on their recommendation, and so Paul was awarded the W1FB Technical Excellence Award. It comes with it says a 9-inch pewter loving cup and base. So what does that look like? Lots of paper. Is this lovely plaque. Hey, thank you, sir. Actually taped up better than my fingers will undo it. But let me tell you what it says on it. Hold it right side up. Oh, sorry. This is Paul, by the way. ARL Doug DeMaw W1FB Technical Excellence Award 2024 Paul Wade W1GHZ. And I'll let you unwrap it. But, thank you for the photos. And you got it? Okay. So Paul continues to write for ARL, for QST, QEX, and other things. I just want to thank him very much for being a contributor. And as most articles in QST, particularly the technical ones, we depend on the amateur radio community to write them. We don't generate a lot of those articles internally. We really appreciate the authors that come forward and write interesting things. You don't have to be a particularly good writer, also a good writer, but you don't have to be a particularly good writer or illustrator in order to write a QST article. You just have to have good ideas and a good way to describe what your topic is and your project is. And we've got some really good editors and people that make longhand into type look really good. So all I can say is don't hesitate to write for QST or for other ARL publications. We really need your help to do a good job with the magazine and the various other technical publications. So anyhow, thanks to Paul again. And Paul lives in Cabot, so it's not too far from here. But he says it takes more than twice as long as it is miles to get there. So get to know him while he's here, or you can catch him on the microwave bands. And anyhow, let him inspire you to do some writing yourself. Okay, so that's number one. Thank you very much, Paul. Second, Paul, why don't you come up? Other Paul. A1SU is your Vermont section manager, and he's been a section manager for a while now.
Yes, since 2002,
Yeah, been a
like
while.
2003, something like that.
So Paul worked with the previous director, and one of the things he has is a plaque for a Vermont Radio Club for how many years?
60 years.
60 years of affiliation with ARL. And they were unable to present it last year, so we're hoping that we have some folks from the Central Vermont Club here today.
Central Vermont Amateur Radio Club. Anybody here? Come on up. Come on up. So,
All yours.
an ARL affiliated club is a club that kind of goes above and beyond to help other people with Elmering and public relations, emergency communications, technical activities, other operating activities. And you help out with various health and welfare events such as the Vermont 50, I think it's called. And you have fox hunts throughout the year, and you have 10-meter and 2-meter nets. So this is a plaque recognizing CVARC W1BD ARL affiliation on March 6, 1962. So you were 60 years old a few years ago, but we're a little late. And Fred Kemmerer, AB1OC, was the division director of the Border Technique. And Bill Temple's K9HI is the vice director. So I just want to present that to you guys. I don't know if you up. Yeah. You have to go there.
I think I remember going to a Hamfest, when we were Hamfest. I think it was in a concert hut like building somewhere out. Randolph, is that what it was? Yeah, okay. Yeah, but that wasn't recently. That was like 15 years ago, maybe. Anyhow, okay, so thank you very much. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so third week of January and the third week of July are the meeting dates for the ARL board of directors. And typically, that's the point at which 15 board members and 15 vice directors and a few officers and a few staff members show up. And we talk about what's going on with ARL, make some decisions on the budget and among other things for the coming year, and talk about the issues we have and the issues we need to work on and improve on. So we had this meeting a couple of weeks ago. About a week or so ago, a ARL bulletin went out with a summary of the activities that happened during that meeting. And the minutes came out about a week or so ago as well, and they're posted online on the ARL website. Something a lot of people don't know is that from those meetings, a bunch of committee reports are circulated amongst the board as we evaluate programs and evaluate activities we need to be involved in. Most of those reports, many of those reports, I should say, maybe not most of them, are also available online. If you go to the ARL website, and actually I think it's just arl.org/committee-reports. You can get a listing of them and look through them. So there's information there on the various activities going on within ARL in terms of programs. With a couple that aren't posted because they have either confidential information or some budget stuff or some business plan information. But for the most part, the committee reports are posted online, and I encourage you to look through them. There's roughly 20 years worth of them online, and you can see some of the things that the ARL is doing for not only for members, but for HAMS as a whole. One of the failings we've had over the years is we're not very good at publicity and communications, hard to believe, outside of radio. We know how to do radio. We don't know how to do PR very well enough. And I think that's, over the years, that's been a tough problem for us because we need to do better at telling people what's going on, how Arrl uses our resources to do better for amateur radio. Now, roughly speaking, about a quarter of our income comes from membership dues from members. About a quarter of it comes from advertising and sales of publications as well. It's another piece, and a growing piece is income from people who have made donations to ARL. Sometimes that's in the form of somebody's estate. Sometimes it's just a donation. We also have the ARL Foundation, which is actually a separate organization that offers grants and scholarships to kids going off to college. So we have income from a bunch of different sources, and it all adds up to, this year it's about a $15 million budget for ARL. That supports a staff of about 80 people, almost all in Newington. We've got one in Washington. We actually hire an attorney in Washington as well. And we have a couple of consultants that are working on some things with Congress. But it's not an insignificant budget. And one of the reasons that I ran for office again is because I think we hadn't been putting our priorities where they needed to be. One was just focusing on dealing with the issues nationally, both with the FCC and Congress, and also PR and getting information out about what we do. I think we were trying to do a lot of things without focusing enough on some of the key things. So it's summarizing, if you look back at the last 4 or 5 years of ARL board meeting minutes, you'll find that a lot of time has been spent on, I'll call it an introspective look at our organizing documents, our articles of association, our bylaws, how we organize ARL internally, which is a good thing to do, and you need to do that. Every organization does that periodically. But we weren't doing things well enough to talk that members had been telling us we needed to do. So there's things that we just haven't been doing well enough to give you the confidence that we're doing the right things. So if you look at the last few years, you won't be impressed by our minutes. I guess I'll just say it that way. And you won't be impressed if you look at the minutes from our January meeting, because we spent a lot of time on our internal bylaws and activities. One of the things the board has been struggling with the last few years is how we deal with ethics and elections. And we've struggled to update our bylaws based on what our Connecticut attorneys say the board ought to be focused on. And also we've had some issues with elections where we've had not a smooth process of handling them. So we had a proposal in January to make some changes. We had a pretty lengthy debate on those and finally decided we're on the right track, but they weren't polished enough to go ahead and approve and be done with. So we've given ourselves another 6 months. So in the July meeting, hopefully we'll take it up one last time and make some changes that will put the new rules into effect. The discussions we had were pretty good. I mean, it's not like a town council meeting where we're throwing spitwads at each other, but there's not complete agreement on the board on what to do. So we have some good spirited discussions, and we're close, I guess I will say. So hopefully in July we'll get that finished off, and we'll focus much better on the things we need to do. And some of those things, for example, are dealing with the FCC. FCC has been mostly absent from the amateur radio activities for the last 10 years. There have been a bunch of things that not only ARL has asked for from the FCC, but others in the community have asked for the FCC, and they've basically just been sitting on the on the shelf for 8, 7, 8, 10 years in some cases without any action. And we need to move them along. We believe the FCC is going to take some steps forward on that in the next few months. We've been privately told that they might combine 3 or 4 of those pending ones into one, also an omnibus bill, one that combines several of them in one, and put it out for possible action in the next few months. What they're sitting on, some of the things they're sitting on, for example, are a request by the amateur radio industry to change the rules that limit amplifiers to a 15 dB gain. That was put in effect maybe 40 years ago to prevent amplifiers from being easily used in the CB band, when that was a much bigger activity than it is these days. But the problem is that a lot of the solid state amps need to be built differently, and a 15 dB gain really impacts what some of them are capable of doing. So hopefully the FCC will move on that. We've been waiting for 8, 9 years now for them to take some action on a request we put in 2018 to make some changes to the technician license to make it so that technicians had a little bit of access on the HF bands for digital modes. Right now, if you're a tech, you can operate on 80, 40, 15 meter CW, but not digital modes and not any sideband. So the hope is that we'll give techs a little bit of activity on the HF bands, because most, close to 2/3 of the hams in the US are technician licensees. And the activity on VHF is great, and techs are doing real well there. But for emergency communications, we not only need local activity within 50 miles or so, but we need to be able to talk to people at farther distances. So there's a lot of interest in getting more activity or more capability on the HF bands, particularly on digital modes. So we're hopeful to get some technician access there. So that's been in the queue for 6, 7 years now, and we hope the FCC will move on that. We've also asked for some changes to the 80 meter band so that there's a little bit more room for digital modes and CW. When the FCC changed voice privileges maybe 15 years ago on 80 meters, they moved the lower end of the 80 meter phone band all the way down to 3600, which was a little bit too much at the time. At least that was our feeling at the time. So we've asked them to move it back up a little bit, up the band a little bit. Anyhow, so those are things pending with the FCC. We also, 8, 9 years ago, worked with not only the FCC, but Congress on a couple of things that we wanted them to do for us, which was to extend the PRB1 legislation, which gives you the right to a reasonable antenna at your home, but does not include people that are in homeowner associations or condos. The satellite TV industry got something that let you in a condo put up a satellite dish, but not an amateur radio antenna. So we're hopeful to get some release from the FCC there. And just after I left the board, the incoming board made a change to what the language should be, and that took them several years. It's back. It was back in the last Congress, which ended in December, but it only got a little bit of traction, a little bit of support. Those 2 bills in the House and the Senate have been reintroduced for this Congress. It's 2 years worth of Congress. So we're going to be pushing a lot harder to get different senators and members of the House of Representatives to sign up as a co-sponsor on the new bills. And at some point, we'll be asking you, probably in the next several months, to contact your two senators or congressmen to support those bills. So look for that request coming in the next few months, because in the end we think it's a condo or a homeowner organized development. I mean, it was important, and you don't have, it's not like everybody will get to have a 50-foot tower, but you might be able to put up a reasonable 6-meter or 2-meter antenna, something like that, or maybe a short vertical in the back. So we're hopeful to be able to get that through Congress, and if we need to, we can also go back to the FCC and try it there. But we know that the FCC takes a long time. Now, the complication in all this is that we just had a change in administration in Washington. It's a little hard to tell how things are going to go for the next 2 years. It may be easier for us, but it may be harder for us. I just don't know. I know that the incoming FCC chairman is a strong proponent of freeing up spectrum for commercial use. That doesn't sound good for us, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes, because usually our use of particularly the VHF and microwave spectrum tags along with government use. And we've been good neighbors with the various government uses of spectrum over the years, and most of our bands are shared today. We've just about lost our access to 3 gigahertz. At this point, we still have it, but I'd say it's kind of hanging by a thread because they just haven't finalized the rules there yet. And we're at risk in several other places. There's some discussions about the 900 megahertz band as well. We actually have some risk on the HF bands as well. There's a group of people that are really interested in something called high-speed trading. And they like HF bands because with HF radio, you can communicate from Chicago to New York or to Europe quicker than you can over fiber. It sounds kind of weird, but fiber is not as quick. And in trading, stock trading and so on, those milliseconds make a difference in terms of whether you get in there first or second or lose the deal. So they like, there's a group out in Chicago in particular that have an experimental license to do that. The problem is the way they're currently licensed on the experimental basis is that they really aren't protecting the amateur spectrum that's nearby where their transmitters are. And they're 15 or 20 or 25 kW transmitters that are often nestled pretty close to the 20-meter band, for example. And we're just really afraid that if the FCC moves ahead with that they're not going to protect the neighboring users of spectrum, and particularly us. So that's coming. Those are threats that we know are potentially on the table in the next couple of years. So my point is here, we've got to up our game in dealing with not only the FCC, but with Congress. We've got to do better at getting the word out about what we do and the reason we have amateur radio in the first place. The fact that we put our own money in, our own time. It's not like we're recovering our costs by selling our services. We do it because we love to do it. We learn by doing it. You pass your tech general extra class license. You don't know very much when you get started. You learn it by getting on the air, and that's really an important thing to countrywide, because as you learn that stuff, sometimes that sends you in a career that relates, and that career supports all of the other communication stuff that happens in the world. So there's a real value in amateur radio, and we need to be able to make sure that the FCC and Congress recognizes that. And at the same time, the FCC is what used to be 30 years ago a bunch of a lot of hams and a bunch of qualified engineers. The FCC's much more a bunch of attorneys these days, and they're good attorneys. They do things from an attorney's point of view, and they deal with the regulations, but they don't understand the technology that they're um, working with in many cases. So that's one of the main things that I want to see the ARL do better, and I think we're planning this year to do better. We've made some changes in how we approach it. We've got some changes in how we're going to work with Congress, and we've got some consultants working with us to help us along. Let's see, one of the other things to mention, FCC, election managers. One of the things I'm going to be doing this year, despite my protests, is I ended up on the elections committee, the ethics and elections committee as a member. That's actually where I didn't want to be because it's a painful thing to do. ARL Ethics and Elections Committee is a group of 3 board members that are not up for election in the current year that basically have to deal with ethical issues and election issues involving the rest of the board. So you're basically dealing with the friends you have across the table and trying to do it in a fair way. So one of the proposals in the bylaw changes is to have an outside group do some of that work. And that may be what we agree to do in July. But in the meantime, that's one of the things I'm doing during this next year. I'm also on one of the committees that deals with membership services, including DX contests, other membership awards, things like that. And I got elected again onto the ARL Foundation board. I served on the ARL Foundation for a lot of years. I was actually president of the foundation for a number of years. And now I'm back involved with that, working on the scholarship committee, helping to decide where who gets which scholarships. Since I left the board, a whole lot of scholarships have been added to the ones that are available. It's like 100. There used to be on the order of 30 or 40. Now there's more like 150 or so scholarships. We got a big grant from the group called ARDC that contributed a couple of years ago. So a whole lot more kids have been able to go to college with some help from scholarships. And the scholarships go from roughly $1,000, and then we just approved one this week that's going to offer $10,000 to a student. Has to be from Texas and has to be engineering. Won't help in Vermont very much, but each of the scholarships has a different term of reference as to the kind of the field of study you go into, the region of the country that it applies to, and the amount being awarded. Some are wide open and some are fairly narrow. But anyhow, so I've talked way too much. I guess what I want to do now is let you go with some of the questions you might have, some comments. Be glad to field any questions you have, and if we need to talk afterwards, be glad to stick around as well. So is everybody really happy with ARL? Anybody really unhappy? Okay, Craig. I used to work with Craig, by the way.
Many years ago. What overall USD
I agree. Yeah. The question was, how are people feeling that ARL members, regular members, not life members, who had a 1, 2, 3 year membership that the board decided that you had to pay extra for the paper copy of QST now from last year and into the future. The dues were raised to $59 basic, and then there's an extra $25 fee for paper version of QST. The answer is people were pissed off. People were not happy with that change. And the board revisited last year and did not change that. They voted to continue that. The bottom line was, in order to continue offering QST via paper instead of electronically, they had to make up more than $1 million. And they didn't want to raise the dues any more than 59. So they made it up by saying, sorry, we're switching it. You're going to get it electronically. If you still want it in paper, you have to pay extra. It did not go over well. I mean, I looked at it and I said, you can't take something away from people that already paid. Why? All it does is get people ticked off. And it did. I mean, I agree. I think it's probably, at this point, it's been more than a year. It's probably too late to go back, but people were not happy. And that's the short answer. I'm not happy. I don't see an easy way to go back at this point. Sure.
With regard to that, what's the publication? What's MFA? That
Yep. Mhm. Yeah, those are advertising is in publications. It's not a growth center for income. Most people in the amateur radio business, are finding that they want to advertise on the web by other means other than in magazines. And many of them basically say, we're advertising in QST because it's important to keep Arrl in business, number one, but it's important for amateur radio to keep Arrl going. And so they have ads in QST, but that's not their best source of customers. I guess I'll just say it that way. So it's been tough. The advertising income has been flat for 10 or 15 years now. So it's tough. It really is. And the area that's growing relates to the folks in this room. We're all getting older. We're all appreciative of amateur radio and the impact on our own lives. So many of us give to the league in terms of bequests or other ways. And so the growth that we see in income comes a lot from donations. Advertising is fairly flat. Publication sales are fairly flat. And membership income is, I'll say, fairly flat as well. So, I mean, you're right. People were not happy. I currently don't see an easy way around that. The budget this year is actually less than the budget last year. We actually had to, and it's not a break-even budget either. It's a budget that's going to have some loss. But over the years, the league typically has had, I'll say, 4 or 5 years of loss, followed by 1 or 2 good years. The pattern is more, down and then up for a little bit, and then down and then up for a little bit. So we're doing okay. We're not doing super, is the best way to describe it. One of the biggest problems we have, and it goes back to what I said near the beginning, which is that we don't do a good enough job on publicity about what we're doing. We don't tell people well enough about the programs we have, the value of them. And as a result, we can get overwhelmed on social media on some issues, and we don't do a good job of countering that. That's been a long-term problem, but it's a problem not only for Arrl, but for a lot of organizations. It's a tough world on social media. And there's a lot of misinformation. I'll just say it that way. It's not all accurate. Some of it is, some of it's not. So just be careful on the sources you use. for information. If you have a question you need to get a real answer to, I'll do my best to give you a straight answer. And I think you'll find that anybody in Newington will as well as the rest of the members of the board. So feel free to ask questions. My phone number and email address is in QST. Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. Did you have anything more, Craig? Okay. All right. Yes, sir. The best answer to that is the current FCC chair. His name is Carr. Recently moved into that office this last month, basically. He was one of the writers in the what do you call it, 2025 plan. And it was, yes. So the answer is we saw where he was coming from when that came out last year, and we've been watching that ever since. There are discussions happening about how to counter some of that, but until you actually know what the detail is, it's hard. It's not like we have a lawsuit ready to drop because we don't know what the issue particularly is yet. But we expect something to happen. Hopefully, amateur radio has not been high on anybody's priority within the FCC in a long time. So we're hoping that it will stay that way, and we can continue to exist on our little. Yes. Yeah, but much of it is relatively small and shared. So if they deal with us, and particularly at VHF and microwaves, they're going to also have to be dealing with government spectrum, and that's all managed by the NTIA, which is the manager of government spectrum, and they'll have to have two conversations there to move forward. But I hear you. Yeah. Nothing definitive, but and if I did have something definitive, I wouldn't tell you. I guess I'll say it that way too, because we're kind of gaming it out to figure out what are the things we need to do but we don't have a piece of paper ready to file. So, yeah, go ahead. The best way to describe it is when we get to a really tough case of somebody being a complete jerk or worse on the air, is that the FCC almost never gets involved. And that's right, but there's limits that what we can do as a community too. And in the worst cases, we would hope that the FCC would take some action. And the answer is we have a pretty good group now doing monitoring on HF and VHF. And the worst cases can be brought to the FCC. We've got Riley Hollingsworth managing that group of volunteers. And if you know of Riley, it's because he was really good when he worked directly for the FCC at dealing with people that were tough cases. I guess I'll just describe it that way, or worse. He basically dealt with hams that were crazy on the air as a psychologist, and he would call them on the phone and talk to them and work out some ways to redirect their anger or whatever, and was pretty successful at it. Not all, but pretty. Okay, I hear what you're saying. The other complicating piece there is that he couldn't deal with all of them, and some were particularly bad. And then when those get, and he has ability now to refer them to the FCC. The FCC then separately makes their own determination of whether there's a problem or not. They make their own documentation. They can't just take an audio tape saying that I did something bad. They have to. Yeah, but their problem is they can't enforce directly either. They can make a decision and then it gets referred to the Department of Justice. And they have to decide if it's worth their time compared to everything else on their plate. And that hasn't been necessarily forthcoming either. But no, I hear what you're saying. The general tenor, right? Yep. Yep. Yeah, but there wasn't when I got my license either. You know, when I was 13 or 14, and I had a group of eighth grade friends that I could talk to, and that was good. And no, I agree. People, you know, we're not very nice to young kids on the air, or women. I agree, and it's definitely a problem. And the most important thing to understand is that in order to get somebody not only licensed and on the air, but to find a home in some activity in amateur radio, you have to give them the opportunity to try a lot of different things, you know, whether it's traffic nets or repeaters, DMR, digital modes, whatever. You have to let them, give them the opportunity to go into a lot of different activities, and something will stick and something won't. Getting people on the air is incredibly important. And if all of those options turn out to be mean old people, then that's not a good sign. I mean, I completely agree. And you know from the activities you have on the air, when people are not pleasant, and you know, sometimes it's the surrounding community that has to get involved in it. Repeater owners are sometimes reluctant to kick people off. Sometimes it's difficult to do that, but it's something that as a licensee they may need to do. But no, I hear you. And in many cases, we're our own worst enemy. Yeah. No, I hear you. But yeah, it's a good thing to raise. Appreciate that. Behind you. Go ahead. Yep. Yep. Yeah. That's part of it. Yep. Yep. Right. I think I think the psychology on that was that somebody had bought a membership that included it, and it was being taken away. And I think that's the point at which it wasn't handled well. But I hear what you're saying. You know, when you look at it that way, you know, mailing cost is probably half of that. My wife tells me it's $9. So yeah, yeah. The, yeah, the answer is yes, not exactly yes, but close to yes. The board has an executive committee that meets in between the board meetings that deals with things that need to be handled before the next one and updates, and they do that by Zoom mostly. Second is there's a horribly large number of committees that exist, 22 or 3 of them within the board, mostly involving board members, some outsiders that meet periodically in between the board meetings, and almost all of that is by Zoom. So there are some decisions being made. There are some that are not because they really require a policy decision that the board can only make. So the minor decisions are made in between, but something that says, well, we need to add a new award, that would be seen as something that would take a board action. You know, the problem we have is that everybody that's on the board is a ham and loves ham radio and do it, and we all do it in different ways. But we like to deal with the ham radio part of Arrl. You know, like to deal with field day and the rules for field day or contests or traffic handling or whatever. We like to deal with the ham radio part of it. As a board, we're not used to dealing with it at the policy level or the business level in terms of making sure that we're putting together and soliciting good manuscripts for publications and making sure that we're investing well and things like that. So the board is traditionally, it's not the same kind of board that you'll have on a lot of companies where you have people that are extremely good and with experience running a board and serving on a board. I guess I would describe it as we have a lot of amateur board members. And I was one of those when I first got elected. I mean, Craig mentioned that we used to work together. I worked for 4 years in Newington when Craig was there. I went, we both got paid about $10,000 a year. It was a great experience, but we also decided to go elsewhere to make our fortunes. Whether we did or not is another story. But I learned a lot. I mean, I decided to run for the board. So I got on the board and I'm looking around and I see a bunch of people that are making decisions by sharing hand signals about, well, should we support this or not? And it was a really weird thing coming to a board meeting. I'd never been to one. But I learned over the years a whole lot about how boards work by being on the Arrl board. I learned enough that I actually ran and got on some of the town board and committees in my town. And actually I became first selectman or mayor for a term in my own town, which I highly recommend to anybody that lives, get involved in your town, make sure that they know you and know that you know ham radio. But back to your original question, the board tends not to think of themselves in many cases as the governance part of the organization that makes sure that it continues to make money, puts resources in the right places, and has a good set of programs for members. Because in the end, any money that we make has to go back into the organization in some way. So I don't know, long answer. Does it answer directly? Somewhat. We could. The board actually started to do that. Yeah, I know. I hear you. The board started to do that a year or two ago and then voted not to do it. They actually did vote. They actually had several Zoom meetings last summer after the cyber attack that screwed things up in May. So the board can get together when necessary by conference call or Zoom. So, and those meetings are also documented and put online, so you can see what's going on there, or some of what's going on. So, yeah, we can. We typically just have 2 formal meetings. And the 2 formal meetings are actually really important because I think if you know from your own club, if you only have Zoom meetings, there's a whole lot of stuff that does not happen because you're not talking to people side to side in person and whatever. So I'm running out of time here. So Paul.
So, I have 2 questions. Vice Director. Shadow board. Shadow board.
Not the same. The ARL from time to time has had, how do I say this politely, difficult members of the board. And you may have similar people in some of your clubs where you have somebody who just takes over meetings or doesn't go with the flow. I guess I'll put it that way. So the board has had some difficult members of the board over time. And as a result, the group of board members over the last 5 years has sometimes gotten together separately by themselves to talk about stuff. And that didn't always include everybody, particularly they were trying to not deal with a couple of people on the board. Mike had the ability to go into both circles of people and talk with them. And he didn't think it was particularly good to have people excluded in those conversations. And I think he was right that the board didn't handle the situations well. It may have been the only practical thing to do for the board to actually go forward. But for example, there were some members of the board over time that would take internal information that shouldn't be public and make it public, or make comment about it that weren't accurate as if it was accurate. So over time, there have been some members of the board that have not just had opinions, but gone beyond what most people would think. I mean, for example, if there's something the Arrl is doing internally that I disagree with, my job is not to come here and tell you all about it. Really, it's for me to deal with it internally, try to impact the direction the organization is going, and try to fix what I see as a problem. But if the board decides by a 10-5 vote that we're going to do X, basically I need to either support that decision or stay quiet about it as a good board member. If I really disagree with it, then I can quit. And I can do it from the outside and say, hey, the board's screwed up, they're doing this. But while I'm on the board, well, my job is to support the organization in a general way. And we'll talk afterwards. That's the official hand signal. It's not 1 finger, it's 2. Is that what that was?
The next button I push is the one that's the trap door.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.